When was the last time? Oh my, it's been a while. Why, you may ask? Well, it was just adult life. But I might have finally figured some things out and actually continue the series. Back when I started, I really wanted to cover all the episodes, and I don't want to give up. So here I am back, and I'll be trying to finish this tier list series. Also, I changed my mind in terms of having these videos in 2 parts. I think it's more convenient to have a season per video. So I guess I need to merge the first part with this. So the original will still be included, which means the second part of the season 5, which is what I recorded today, will start at this timestamp. But I'm not gonna be doing anything to the old upload. It's still gonna be there on YouTube. I'll put the link in the description also. Also, since the last time, I've got some upgrades. I have the new camera, which hopefully will make the video quality better, and a new tiny microphone if I ever want to change the angle I'm recording at, so I don't need to speak to this one. Then there is the room. I renovated it in March. Now it's October. Yikes. So from a setup that looked like this to one looking like this. Although I still need to figure out which angle I want to record at. For now, let's keep this one just to simulate the first part of the season 5 video. Speaking of it, I'm gonna play it from the beginning like normal, so we'll see each other after the first part. Plus, keep in mind that over the time my style has probably changed a little, and I might think differently about the episodes. Not much probably, but I've watched all of my previous videos from this series. I don't want to say they're a bit cringy at times, but I would definitely say different stuff about some of the episodes. Which I'm not going to do, by the way. I mostly agree with my past self, so let's stick to it. What's going on, everybody? Here's Johnny. At the end of the season 4 video, I stated that I can't wait to talk about season 5, because alongside seasons 2 and 3, as a child, I thought season 5 also had some of the best episodes ever. It all had to do with the overall amount of energy and dynamics. It felt like every episode was extra hyper, even more than season 4 was. But is it still true after all these years? Well, me and my trusty tier list are going to refresh the memories. But I know one thing already. Maybe I'm not gonna mention it every time, but whenever an episode has a lot of positive dynamic, it will automatically go one tier higher. Also, since season 5 was experimenting with the ideas and the humor and plots for episodes in general, it has mixed reviews among the community, so that's gonna be interesting. Friend or Foe is definitely an episode we needed, and I'm really glad they made it a 22-minute special. I think the direction they went with the backstory that they were poor and all that is really touching. Even if nobody liked them, at least they had each other, and sometimes that's just what you need in life. So we also get a good lesson. And it kinda makes sense that, as children, they would start to hate each other from a little argument. It's all kinda relatable. I like how at the Krusty Krab, both Mr. Krabs and Plankton alter the stories a little bit to make the other guy look worse. However, it bugs me how Karen was there, apparently recording everything. Remember, Krabs and Plankton are old guys, so their childhood took place like 60 years prior. No way Plankton would have the technology. Digital color film. But it's not enough to ruin this great episode. It is S tier. I also love the KO joke. Also Patchy stuff. I'm usually neutral to it, but I thought his segment in this episode was pretty good. The original Fry Cook, so this episode fluctuates with the energy. On one hand, there's some good dynamics between Jim and other characters, but on the other hand, it kinda feels mean-spirited for SpongeBob. Don't get me wrong, Jim is an excellent mentor for SpongeBob, and a great character overall, but ultimately, I think SpongeBob was treated a bit too harsh. That's why it's only A tier. Remember that SpongeBob was doing great even without Jim, so why should he change what he does? He gave up a bit too easily. It was pretty clear that Jim is done working as a fry cook, so I don't know why he thought he would lose the job at the Krusty Krab. Now I don't even care what you think about Nightlight, because this is where Season 5's aforementioned good energy and overall dynamics takes off. Seems like every second is packed with action and keeps you hyped throughout. I absolutely love that stuff. And the childish humor. The episode itself also has perfect setup that is funny, and Krusty Krab moments, and stuff with Patrick. And I love the ending bit with Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, and the villain fight. This episode is twisted like a bag of noodles, but I'm a sucker for it. It's easily S tier, but where did SpongeBob get all those power outlets all of a sudden? Rise and Shine works because it was shrunk to only 4 minutes. I'm gonna say it right now, sometimes I just adore stupid humor. This episode is definitely a definition of it. It suits the dumb character that is Patrick pretty well. You're probably gonna say that I'm weird, but I think I am. But for me, it is funny. Dumb, childish humor. It lands in S tier. Of course, if it was an 11-minute episode, then we would have a problem. Waiting. So this episode is controversial, and my opinion is also gonna be controversial. So even if not everything makes sense and everything seems annoying, come on guys, it's only 7 minutes long. And despite this episode being about waiting, they kept it dynamic with all those random actions. It's gonna land in A tier, even if it is pretty energetic. SpongeBob and Patrick crying get on my nerves a bit. Now I'm gonna deliver you even more controversial opinions with Fungus Among Us, episode that, according to people, defines all the bad stuff with experimentation of Season 5. I absolutely love this plot, just like Once Bitten, fungus that spreads and is portrayed like a mysterious disease, and the character must undergo a quarantine. Another thing that I like in cartoons are dark and gross out humors, to a certain extent of course. If it's too much, then I wouldn't like it too. But here, they did just a perfect amount. It's S tier. Again, I think it's way too overhated. Also like how they foreshadowed Gary to be a solution for this problem. And we got a happy ending. We are gonna get tired of me saying this, but Spy Buddies is another perfect example of Season 5 energetic and dynamic humor. This here is a funny, cartoonish spy adventure. Everything is pretty straightforward, from having cool gadgets to using them in a wrong way. There are also some really good conflicts and an action-packed fight. Plus we get a bizarre twist ending too. It's easily S tier. I also love that morning scenery. So in both smarts, I kinda like that they tried to make it look like an instructional video. So the episode definitely gets a point solely for that. And another point for giving us some good advice and what we shouldn't do. But on the other hand, I don't like how SpongeBob is portrayed like a complete moron and making everybody's day miserable. I guess we do get some funny moments, but ultimately it's only a B tier episode. I'm glad it only takes 4 minutes, but I think this episode doesn't need to exist at all. I have similar thoughts for good old What Is Name. While I don't think it's bad, because they really had a creative idea and the energy is there, ultimately I just don't really care what happens here. It's A tier nonetheless. I quite like the competition between SpongeBob and Squidward, as well as the chase scene later on. Squidward's punishment was way too harsh, but the twist with the brochure was pretty funny. Moving on to New Digs, another concept for an episode I really enjoy. Character moving to its workplace. I always find it interesting, and I wonder how it would look like if I moved to my job. This is an S tier episode. You may think plots like these are predictable, but this is the first time we see it in SpongeBob, so I'm gonna let it slide. Especially that they use plenty of good gags, like everything gradually getting more and more out of control. This was a very enjoyable episode. Just like the next one, Krabs a la mode. I'm gonna say it again. Season 5's good energy and dynamic, now with extra beautiful icy landscapes. This plot idea was definitely unique, and it was used to its best with miscellaneous ice-themed gags and events. It's S tier, although one thing that bugs me is how Mr. Krabs is so obsessed with the thermostat. And also that the thermostat is only present in this episode. Also, why does Squidward slip on the ice? Doesn't he have like suction cups on his tentacles? Roller cowards. So that's definitely another pinnacle of season 5. Alright, you're probably tired of me saying this. You know what I try to say. I love the gradually rising tension between SpongeBob and Patrick. How they are both scared and don't want to say the truth to each other. This episode is also exciting, because the viewer also wants to see what happens. Not to mention, funny gags are everywhere. That nightmare dream was probably my favorite S tier episode for sure. I also love how SpongeBob and Patrick eventually tell each other that they were scared, but ride the ride anyway. I would describe Bucket Sweet Bucket as harmless. It's a nice, quite amusing little adventure. I would say it was kinda cute that they tried to help, but they did a poor job at the beginning. I like how Plankton is constantly getting annoyed by them. It's A tier. I quite like home renovation programs. So this episode was appealing to me in a slightly different way than usual. I absolutely love how at the very end they turned Chum Bucket into Krusty Krab with a nice looking interior. Well done, Squidward. However, one major thing that bugs me is how at the very beginning Plankton struggled to paint, but later on we see him painting the whole Chum Bucket in mere seconds. Well, I don't mind this show not having continuity between episodes, but it definitely should have within one. Now we have to love a patty. Even the best cartoons and seasons sometimes have a major stinker. And this one right here definitely applies to being one of season 5. So the main problem with this episode is that it breaks one of the fundamental rules set by Steven Hillenburg himself. One of the rules is that SpongeBob should never get a driving license. Another rule is that Krabby Patty's secret formula should never be revealed. And the other rule is that SpongeBob should never be in love. They broke the law. It's like breaking laws of physics. You can't do that. And SpongeBob doesn't even fall in love with a different sponge. Not even a kitchen sponge. Instead, it's a freaking Krabby Patty. Plus, SpongeBob is really out of character in general, in a very bad way. But from the positives, the nighttime sky looked great. And the song was kinda cool. But still. Also, SpongeBob murdered clams. What the hell? Breath of fresh Squidward. So I was actually kinda surprised they went with the obnoxious and mean-spirited behavior at the beginning of the episode. I kinda felt like I was watching those episodes from season 4 and 6, but I guess they pretty much had to make that setup. It actually turned out pretty well for the rest of the episode. When SpongeBob and Squidward switched roles, it was good to see SpongeBob take some of his own medicine. He pretty much deserved that. So, towards the end of the episode, he was way too harsh for Squidward. But I guess it's okay since he wanted to apologize. It's A tier. On top of that, the ending bit when they all become Squidwards was really hilarious. I think Money Talks works perfectly as a 7-minute episode. Although I wonder how an 11-minute version would look like. Anyway, this story of a greedy man not being careful for what he wishes for is amazing. I love how the money talk goes way against him, and he was totally not expecting that. Totally S tier. It's a short but a great story that teaches us a good moral. You shouldn't want too much. SpongeBob versus the Patty Gadget is so weird, but in a good way. I absolutely love the rhyming. It only works because it's a 4-minute episode. Any longer than that and it would quickly become boring. They just did a perfect amount. Another thing that works in that length is that silly competition between SpongeBob and the Patty Gadget. It was clearly inspired by some sort of a medieval poem or something. It has that folklore atmosphere. I absolutely adore that. Easy S tier, of course. Slimy dancing is all about, well, dancing, which is definitely not my pair of shoes. But the episode is far from not being entertaining. I'm not a fan of Squidward's dancing performance, and honestly, all these dancing montages were kinda boring. But I like the interactions between him and SpongeBob. I probably like their combination here more than I did in Squidward Tentacle Pants. It goes in the B tier. The episode is harmless and there's very little to dislike. I'm just not a fan of dancing. However, that epilogue was just hilarious. the cramp thing is definitely on the funny stupid side. Krusty Sponge is amazing, even if that's a perfect metaphor for how SpongeBob become influential in the real world. This is an idea that could very easily work in universe. After all, the Krusty Krab is famous thanks to SpongeBob, so I think Krabs would eventually do all this. This episode is S tier easily. I just love how everything becomes SpongeBob, and that's pretty much all that happens. Everything becomes SpongeBob, which leads Krabs into insanity and going way too far. That progression made sense and gives us a good moral, that we shouldn't go too far. Again, Sing a Song of Patrick is another, I would say, even more amazing than Krusty Sponge. I think it's safe to say that this episode is an embodiment of funny stupid, because personally, I think every single minute, every single second is absolutely hilarious. Definitely my pair of shoes. I haven't said that in a few, so I'll remind you. This is peak Season 5 energy. That song Patrick wrote is unironically catchy, and I love how it's so bad that it causes destruction. Easy S tier. You may say that this isn't your typical SpongeBob humor, it's not the same as seasons 1 to 3 were, but I like to compare it to delicious foods. Like, Season 2 is a pizza, and Season 5 is a hamburger. They are different, but both are so tasty. A flea in our dome. Right off the bat, there's more bad than good. I don't like all those itching puns. And while the energy was there, most of the time I kind of felt uncomfortable watching this. However, I like how in the second half, the fleas are transforming into many different things, and the trio had to battle them. But then we get even more disturbing images, how they all get swollen and stuff. And all of a sudden, Patrick starts to argue with everybody. Overall, I'm gonna put it in C tier. For the most part, watching fleas bite somebody is not entertaining at all, but at least we got some action. That excessive and exaggerated crying of SpongeBob at the beginning of the episode was kinda amusing, and it was nice for them to prepare a surprise party for Sandy. It's nowhere near enough to bring it up into a higher tier. The final nail in the coffin is, again, how they sucked an entire ocean into a tiny space, just like they did in Reef Blower. I have mixed feelings about the donut of shame. On one hand, I like how Patrick realized that the donut isn't his and tried not to eat it and give it back to SpongeBob, but on the other hand, I didn't really care. The episode is short, but I felt like it dragged on and on. Some scenes were a bit too long, and the conflict itself wasn't really a big deal. It's just a donut. I'll put this one in B tier. It's just an average adventure. I could kind of feel that stress Patrick felt, but for the most part, I wasn't really into it. The Krusty Plate, on the other hand, you wish that episode was longer. The donut of shame could be cut and this one extended, because this is an exaggerated, trivial problem done right. We only had a few of them, but all the ways SpongeBob tried to clean the plate were creative. I especially love that last contraption with laser beams. How it not only cleans the plate, but also warps reality around. It's a simple S tier episode.
And here we are in the second half. Goo Goo Gas is enjoyable all around. All these tiny sequences of Plankton trying to steal the formula and failing all the time are just enjoyable. It is an S tier episode. I'm actually shocked that Plankton told his whole plan next to SpongeBob and he called the police. That felt surreal, to be honest. Or when it turned out that the gas is actually making everybody older. And Plankton escaping the handcuffs was just plain hilarious. This episode is so weird, but in a positive sense. Even though I don't like babies and stuff related to them, like there's a lot of infant humor, it doesn't affect the episode at all. It's incredibly funny, the powdered baby and how Plankton asks if they are made out of artificial babies must be probably one of the best jokes in the entire show. One thing that is jarring though is how the very end everybody stays as babies and Plankton is effectively unable to revert them back. It is a bit grim, but I like grim things, so that can stay. So right off the bat, the elephant in the room is the overall stereotype of the French and the portrayal of everything they do, how snobby they behave and how their cooking must be perfect. That's actually a bit annoying, but I think it's somewhat balanced by the stuff at the Krusty Krab. How Mr. Krabs obviously can't handle the expensive situation, and how the chef and all the fancy people love the Krabby Patty after all, which was highly predictable anyway. The beginning scene was kinda I liked how Squidward choked on the sentiment, which is pretty much me. And people eating like pigs, even with pig sounds in the background, was amusing. Overall, this episode isn't terrible, but I would consider it just average. B tier sounds appropriate, and this is the only appearance of Pearl in this season, and it's only her voice which is just bizarre. So there it is, the first truly big one. But I'll try to keep it relatively short and focus on the major stuff. First, the patchy segments. They are useless, awful, and have horrible CGI. Besides, he's just so aggressive. They can be easily edited out because they serve absolutely no purpose and only litter the episode. As to the main story, I like the jokes with the amulet, how Patrick thought they belonged to SpongeBob's ancestors, and everybody's reaction when they found out it's actually a missing piece. I like the idea and the lore of Atlantis, of being this perfect and rich utopia. Designs everywhere are quite awesome. Some of the CGI was a bit too rough though, but I loved the video game footage. I liked how everybody was just happy with Atlantis and what it had to offer, and how the king was genuinely happy that he had guests for the first in a long time. The characters are sometimes a bit too mean, like Mr. Krabs, but that doesn't happen too much. It really feels like a big special. Then there are the songs, and if their big idea was to make it a musical, then that's absolutely fine, I'm not gonna blame them. Some of the songs in the Atlantis actually fit to quickly present everybody's interactions with everything. I think most of the songs are okay, some of them could have been edited out. But obviously SpongeBob and Patrick had to ruin everything at the very end. But at least we got a cool escape and chase scene. Looks like everybody had a great time, myself included. I think that was a decent episode, and I completely don't get how it's getting all the hate. It's not that bad. I think it can land in a high B tier, mainly because of the patchy segments, and some of the songs are unnecessary, plus sometimes the characters are just a bit too mean. Also, what is this abomination? This episode's plot works much better as a 7-minute episode. If it was 11 minutes, then I would have a bad time watching it. Most of the plot relies on the repetition. I get what they were trying to do, but at times it just felt a bit annoying that the whole universe was against SpongeBob on that exact day. And at the very end, of course, Patrick had to be stupid and ruin everything. And the ending gag with the teeth was more weird than funny. It's an alright episode, but I don't really care that much. So I guess it can go in a B tier. I'm glad this one is only 4 minutes, because this episode is just dumb. The whole premise is just Patrick being annoyingly dumb, mostly not funny. He is screwing up the simplest tasks. But I guess you could count a few gags to be funny, like he needs to be gentle with a fridge, only to destroy it a second later. And this is why it avoids the D tier and goes into a low C tier. First off, I'm shocked that SpongeBob has a big and scary cousin who was in prison. That automatically raises the stakes of the episode, and it genuinely keeps me at the edge of my seat. And how SpongeBob thinks his parents are in danger. This episode is dark. There are literal crimes and police mentioned. SpongeBob's imagination is also pretty terrifying. That is until we get to Uncle Captain Blue and all the chores SpongeBob needs to do for him. That was kinda stupid and annoying. But besides him, the episode lands in the S tier due to everything else. It's cool to see SpongeBob's family, at least until we get to Stanley, and the gag with Blackjack being really tiny is really funny. All the twists at the very end were okay. This is another one I can just call good season 5 energy, with pretty much every scene being filled with great humor. Especially how throughout the episode SpongeBob just gets more overconfident and arrogant. All of his stories are hilarious, and he actually got his comeuppance at the very end for lying. This episode is great from start to finish. Obvious S tier. I like Plankton's plan, and the overall setting of this episode makes it feel really different in a good way. Who wouldn't like to meet their heroes in a big event? As always, there's a lot of hype, and all the conflicts between the characters are really nice to watch. Another episode that is just great in general. However, one thing that always bugged me is how Karen bought Plankton the Krabby box and apparently Krabby Patty wasn't there? That would be so easy. Maybe because Karen was there, Krabs made a deal with her not to sell a Krabby Patty. That would make sense, but isn't really addressed. So what is a positive here? SpongeBob and Patrick are in actual jail and must act silly just to balance it out. And I think it works. They pretty much have to be oblivious to make the episode going. And yeah, that's not a bad thing actually. Later we get a somewhat cute play and an escape attempt, which is hilarious, and how SpongeBob and Patrick don't enjoy the actual camp they were supposed to be in. I think it's funny too. Overall, A tier is a perfect place for it. This episode is pretty much the characters getting lost in woods and a cave and getting crazy cliche, where they must survive without any skills and making the situation even worse for themselves by their own stupidity. I've seen this many times in different shows and it actually bores me, because it's so obvious what's most likely going to happen. SpongeBob and Patrick trying to eat themselves, the crazy old guy turning out to be Sandy, and it all was just an experiment that I don't really care about. Squidward insulting SpongeBob and Patrick and how Sandy rescued the cricket are like the only highlights of the episode. In general, it's not a good episode in my book, and in many ways it's just like The Picnic from Gumball, for example. It goes in the C tier. It's not terrible, and there are some gags here and there. So a Western setting is something I always enjoy. I'm a sucker for stuff like these. But with Western settings in cartoons, there are always cliches with it, and they are always the same. All the stereotypes about the Wild West, like the shooting at noon with the hero and the villain, the Western saloon or all the tough cowboys and all that. But these kind of cliches are always appreciated by me and aren't really that jarring. As I said, I like Western settings. Besides, the episode isn't all just stereotypes. There is some SpongeBob humor put into it. The coffin jokey was really funny, and I also enjoyed those talking skulls. I guess Plankton is a funny villain too. And of course, there's the Western music playing throughout. I'm happy that SpongeBob had a famous ancestor. It goes into A tier. It's an okay episode, but far from being really good. This episode is so adventurous and it makes it so fun. Once again, pretty much all interactions between characters are spot on. Plankton insulting the family is brilliant. As always in season 5, this episode just overflows with good energy. And the humor and dialogue and everything. The episode is pretty much just that. That random abyss monster turned out to be somewhat friendly, and that's a massive positive. I like that guy. As well as the design of that gross sandwich. That's it. It's an S tier episode. But the ending is so infuriating. They got rid of all that money just to bring some rocks. Also, Bulletin Board claims to be the first episode that LOL is said, but in this episode they are literally saying LOL squid. So Bulletin Board wasn't the first. No, that has to be my personal favorite of the season, which should imply that it's an easy S tier. This is the pinnacle of season 5 energy. The conflict is humorous. I guess I also love recreations of historical events in general. I pretty much enjoy every second of this episode. Visual humor and writing is excellent. And before you say anything about the gross out humor, which there's a lot, I love gross out humor, so it's perfectly fine. Actually, this episode makes me wanna wash my hands. Honestly, out of all the season 5 specials, this one is my favorite. Right off the bat, I agree that at the beginning of the episode everybody was just a bit too harsh for SpongeBob. And it could have been portrayed in much less aggressive way. But I guess they all learned the lesson later, so it's fine? But anyway, the main reason why I love this episode is the amnesia plot. and the mysterious and dangerous city SpongeBob finds himself in, and the gang everybody's afraid of. People being scared of bubbles is pretty dumb in a funny way, typical SpongeBob gag. There are a lot of great jokes and gags throughout the episode, and for me it's really enjoyable throughout. I'm putting this one in the S tier and I don't care. Plus that gross close-up, it's awesome, I absolutely love it. I'm always just shocked when watching this episode. Treating Squidward nicely and making him the literal star of the show. Getting the bad out of the way first. The whole opening at the Krusty Krab and the hospital is annoying, with small pieces of funny things spread throughout. But starting at the 4-minute mark, the episode turns 180 degrees and becomes incredibly hilarious, but not really for long. After like 2 minutes, I start feeling bad for Squidward again, until he becomes that really handsome Squidward, and then he gets beaten again. I actually wanted to put it into A tier, just because a little over half of the episode is amazing. But I guess the handsome Squidward is so iconic at this point, I can let it slide and put it in the S tier. Right off the bat, I love the apocalyptic tone of this one. I'm a fan of apocalyptic themes, so the mood throughout is definitely there. So naturally, I think the ending with the buried Krusty Krab and the aliens is pretty awesome. But back to the main plot, it's just two things. The song SpongeBob spores are making and the jellyfish being attracted to that. To which I'm just really neutral to. The song is kinda catchy, I guess, and the latter part of the episode in the cave where SpongeBob's getting crazy is just okay. I definitely think the idea of fake SpongeBob making the song and creating that big stone circle is awesome. So I guess that's around high B tier or low A tier. I'll put it in A. It's really borderline. I like the characters of these snarky ladies and how both Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob are acting really goofy next to them and how that makes them just more annoyed. All the interactions between them are brilliant. I also love their sophisticated language and how they made that secret restaurant at SpongeBob's house. SpongeBob's songs is not annoying enough to be a problem, and the Krabby Patty saving the day was kinda obvious. It's a very much enjoyable episode, and it goes into S tier. Honestly, that's the most disappointing way to end the season. Clearly, they didn't have any ideas, so they thought of the most generic plot possible. A one-off family character that is extremely clumsy and annoying. And unfortunately, there is little to none positive things in this episode. Stanley just causes trouble and makes everybody's day worse. I guess the only funny joke is how Squidward shouts, "There's two of them!" and immediately moves. And the scene at the Patrick's house was a bit amusing, but that's it. There is nowhere near to bring this one up. It lands in the D tier. And I also felt bad for Plankton, even though it was just an ending gag. What a fantastic ride that was. So naturally, let's jump to the ratings of the season. We have 22 episodes in the S tier, 8 episodes in the A tier, 6 episodes in the B tier, 3 episodes in C tier and 2 episodes in D tier. The maximum available score for season 5 is 205 points and it's called 168, which is an 80%, which means season 5 goes into the A tier. Final thoughts for season 5? Not really much. I pretty much said everything during the episodes. Season 5's energy carried through the entire season, which is a big step up from season 4 and all that melodrama. It still has great humor and it's still great to rewatch after all these years. The animation style differs from season 4 and maybe the characters are less expressive. They are sure not as hyperactive as they were in season 4, and that's actually a good thing. Season 5 has a lot of amazing episodes, but a lot more of them are going to the lower tiers, which is pretty worrying. Now this is the perfect time to address something. The hypothetical line between good SpongeBob episodes and bad SpongeBob episodes, or rather seasons, which most Sponge boomers would say it's after season 3 and the first movie, but I disagree. I would draw the line right here, after season 5 and before season 6. And trust me when I say it, season 6 through 9A are a massive downgrade to seasons 1 to 5, and I can't wait to get to those. But for now, let's just make a comparison between all the seasons up to this point. Season 1, which had 41 segments, had 20 episodes in A tier, which is 48.8%, 13 episodes in A tier, which is 31.7%, and 8 episodes in B tier, which is 19.5%. Season 2, which had 39 segments, had 29 episodes in S tier, which is 42.3%, 7 episodes in A tier, which is 17.9%, 1 episode in B tier, 2.6%, and 2 episodes in C tier, which is 5.2%. Season 3 with 37 segments had 27 episodes in S tier, which is 72.9%, 8 episodes in A tier, 21.7%, and 1 episode in C and D tiers, which is 2.7%. Season 4, which had 38 segments, had 18 episodes in S tier, 47.4%, 10 episodes in A tier, 26.4%, 8 episodes in B tier, 15.8%, 3 episodes in C tier, 7.8%, and 1 episode in D tier, which is 2.6%. And now Season 5, which had 41 segments. As I already said earlier in the video, it had 22 episodes in S tier, 53.6%, 8 episodes in A tier, 19.6%, 6 episodes in B tier, 14.7%, 3 episodes in C tier, 7.3%, and 2 episodes in D tier, which is 4.8%. Although it may seem Season 5 is the worst so far, it's just a tiny bit below Season 4, and they are both below Season 1, which are really far away from Seasons 2 and 3. Season 5 is the third one with the most S tier episodes. Obviously the amounts of episodes per season vary a bit. It's still before Season 6 and when they increased the number of episodes per season. So statistically they are almost the same. So you should mostly look at the episode percentages. And what is the overall score for all the episodes so far? First, let's count only the first 3 seasons, which combined had 117 segments. There are 76 episodes in S tier, which is 64.9%, 28 episodes in A tier, which is 23.9%, 9 episodes in B tier, which is 7.7%, 3 episodes in C tier, which is 2.7%, and 1 episode in the D tier, which is only 0.8%. The maximum amount of points they could gather is 585, and they gathered 526 points, which is 89.9%, which would make first 3 seasons to be combined in the S tier. Now for all 5 seasons, which combined had 196 segments, there are 116 episodes in S tier, which is 59.1%, 48 episodes in A tier, which is 23.4%, 21 episodes in the B tier, which is 10.8%, 9 episodes in C tier, which is 4.7%, and 4 episodes in the D tier, which is exactly 2%. The maximum amount of points is 918, and the overall score is 849, and percentage-wise, that's 86.6%, which means the whole SpongeBob show up to this point is still an S tier show. Although a very low S tier, it's almost in a high A tier. I think that's fair enough, and that's how it should be actually. Okay, so these were the first 5 seasons of what I truly believe to be the classic SpongeBob era. See you later in Season 6, when the Dark Ages start. I can't wait!